Hello and welcome back to Foreign Correspondents. I'm Somi Sorang, and joining me here in the studio today is our panel of foreign journalists. Welcome to the program.
Hi.
Thank you for being here.
Hello.
There is heightened interest in the world of Korean cinema after director Bong Joon-ho's latest film won the prestigious Palme d'Or Award at the 2019 Cannes Film Festival.
Parasite of Bong Joon.
It's an important milestone for the Korean film industry, which is celebrating its centennial anniversary this year. So on this week's edition of Foreign Correspondents, we sit down with our panel of journalists to get a broad overview of the Korean film industry, to find out more about its unique characteristics and what lies ahead. On May 25th, director Bong Joon-ho's film Parasite was awarded the Palme d'Or at the closing ceremony of the 72nd Cannes Film Festival, the first time a South Korean film has won the top prize at Cannes.
12살의 나이에 영화 감독이 되기로 마음먹었던 되게 소심하고 어리숙한 영화광이었습니다. 이게 될 날이 올 줄은 상상도 못했습니다.
So Fred, what does it mean for a film to be awarded the top prize at Cannes?
I mean, it's great. It's very significant, and I'm really happy for Bong Joon-ho. He's one of my all-time favorite directors. He really deserved it, and I'm happy for Korean. I mean, I think it's a good recognition for Bong Joon-ho, but it's a very good recognition for the Korean cinema as a whole as well. And it's especially significant because, I mean, as Bong said it himself, this year the 100th anniversary of Korean cinema.
칸네 영화제에서 이번 한국 영화 100주년 큰 선물을 이 한국 영화계에 준 것이 아닌가.
So
yeah, it was a very timely win, wasn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
Darcy translated the Korean dialogue of the film Parasite into the English subtitles.
Yeah.
And you also wrote on Twitter that it was a very lonely experience having watched the film but not being able to share it with anyone for 3 months.
Right, because I did the subtitles back in February, and you know, as soon as I watched the film, I just kind of went crazy. I wanted to call up my friends and talk about it, but you know, you have to sign an NDA agreement when you do these subtitles, and it was difficult to keep quiet.
How much significance do you put, Darcy, on the Palme d'Or Award?
Well, I've been waiting for this for many years, and I think that, you know, the festival is such a great showcase for international cinema that films that do win the Palme d'Or really do get a boost in terms of their international exposure. And the film had already been sold to 190-something countries, you know, at the time that the award was announced. Despite that, I think that, you know, because of this award, when it does get released in other countries, it may get more press, it may get a wider release. And people who may not have seen his films yet may be motivated to check it out, which would be great because, you know, he's a director who's very unique, and once you start watching his films, a lot of people really get hooked.
Now, the Palme d'Or certainly isn't the first prize that for Bong Joon-ho to get. He has already earned many accolades worldwide with films such as The Host, Snowpiercer and Okja. Fabian, which of Bong Joon-ho's films have you seen?
Well, all the ones that you mentioned, but my favorite one is actually Memories of Murder. And that's actually only his second movie, I think, the second full-length feature. And for me, it also is really representative of him. I think Bong Joon-ho, he's very unique because he's actually a genre filmmaker. He works in cinematic conventions, but of course breaks those conventions. And by that way, and he has a very distinct visual style, and you know the script is always, you know, it always fits, but you don't get the feeling that he's putting style over content, but it's basically like a fusion. And he appeals to the mainstream. He sells tickets, but he also appeals to the film critics, and it's rather rare.
Right, to get the combination of both. What kind of standing does Bong Joon-ho enjoy back home in France?
I mean, in France, there is a growing interest for Korean cinema that started maybe with Hong Sang-soo, Kim Gi-duk, and Park Chan-wook as well. When Le Transperce-Neige, so in English, The Snowpiercer, came out, initially this is a French graphic novel.
Oh, it is? Okay.
Yeah, so he adapted a French graphic novel. So I think that probably helped him a lot to get some recognition. I mean, he's as many Korean movie makers, Bong Joon-ho is well recognized now.
Okay. Now, if we look back at the history of Korean films and the Cannes Film Festival, Korean films were first invited to the Cannes back in 1984, and since Im Kwon-taek won the Best Director award for his film Painted Fire in 2002, many other movies have come knocking to compete for the Palme d'Or. But it is only this year that has won the Palme d'Or, so why do you think it took so long for a Korean film to be awarded the top prize?
I mean, partly it's just the luck of the draw, because every year at Cannes you have a different jury that's made up of international filmmakers and producers and actors. And they do seem to have different, tastes. So it's very difficult to predict who will win each year.
Right.
It is true that, Korean cinema has been so dynamic for so long, and over the past 20 years it's received a lot of attention at Cannes. There have been some very strong films that were rumored to have strong possibilities of winning the Palme d'Or up until this point, and none has up until now. And so when the award was announced, a lot of journalists in other countries also commented on the fact that this is the first for Korean cinema, that it seemed like it was overdue. And so not only Bong Joon-ho, but I think the whole industry can really celebrate this.
Yeah. Do you think it means a lot that it's even more significant because you mentioned that each year the jury is different, so there is a bit of a random element to it, but this year it was voted the winner by a unanimous vote?
Yes, which is unusual. It's typically you get a lot of arguments in the course of this because you have directors with very different styles and points of view. But clearly, I mean, among the competition titles, there were other films that were well received, but this film, Parasite, was just seen as so unique and so well made. It seemed very timely. It's a film that gives you a lot to think about. And it's just it's impressive on so many levels that it seemed that the jury coalesced around it pretty quickly.
Bong Joon-ho's win at the Cannes Film Festival is quite timely because this year marks the centennial anniversary of Korea's film industry. Korean cinema has seen a meteoric rise over the last 100 years, drawing an audience of over 200 million people every year since 2013. So, Fabian, would you say that Korean moviegoers are more enthusiastic about going to the cinema and going to see a film compared to audiences elsewhere around the world?
Well, you definitely have a very strong cinema culture here. Always when I go to the movies, tickets are booked. I mean, the tickets are sold out. And in Germany, it's not the case anymore. Actually, the cinema culture in Germany is kind of dying out and struggling. We had a lot of small and old cinemas. Then when the multiplex cinemas, the modern cinemas arrived in Germany, they really kind of destroyed the culture to some degree. But also it was a lot of mismanagement, and we don't have such a healthy movie industry like South Korea has. And I think all those factors play into role. But I think in Korea, the cinema is actually still big media that determines the discourse, what you talk about. Let's say students especially, or even on work. Movies still have an impact here. That's what I feel.
Right. It still has a strong presence in our daily social talk.
Yeah, and even France, I mean, we love cinema, and a lot of French people go to watch movies, but even though Korea, in terms of population, is smaller than France, you actually sell more movie tickets in Korea than in France. And you can really see how this is part of the culture and how popular it is.
Darcy, why do you think we have this discrepancy, or that South Koreans are more avid moviegoers?
I mean, I think it just developed as part of the culture. A lot of people talk about the fact that in the 80s, this was a time that, you had a lot of political, people were very focused on politics. And then from the 90s on, that a lot of that energy kind of shifted into culture. And the film industry, I think, was one of the greatest beneficiaries of that. And so that was the decade in which the Busan Film Festival was launched and many other film festivals. You had a lot of film magazines, so that for a long time you had more kind of weekly film magazines in Korea than anywhere else in the world. And the audience is quite passionate about cinema. They're very critical. I've noticed that that they seem to be more critical than in other parts of the world. Whereas if a film comes out and it's only okay, then it really gets grilled by them. But that keeps producers on their toes. If you have an audience that just accepts things as they are, then there's not a lot of pressure put on filmmakers to keep improving. I mean, we really have to give all the credit to the audience, I think. But certainly, I mean, I felt as soon as I moved to Korea that this is a culture that loves cinema and that is constantly talking about cinema.
Right, and because we have so many moviegoers, the size of the Korean film industry is quite large. What would you say are the contributing factors for the Korean film industry's making huge leaps and bounds over the last 100 years?
Yeah, I mean, it's exciting to think that, you know, in this year of 100 years of Korean cinema that we did have this great honor. And then at the press conference after Bong Joon-ho received his prize, he did mention an older director, Kim Gi-young, who worked in the 60s and the 1970s. And for me, that was kind of a touching thing to hear because, you know, Kim Gi-young was a really brilliant filmmaker. I think that in terms of talent, he was definitely the equal of Bong Joon-ho. But he worked in a time when, you know, he didn't really fit into that film industry.
Right.
And I think producers didn't really know what to do with his very unusual creativity. The things have been very difficult for many filmmakers over the history of Korean cinema. You know, there was the Japanese colonial era. There were times when filmmakers really struggled with censorship, and when the industrial level, the industry couldn't develop in the way that it really needed to develop. So in a sense, it's only been in the last 20, 30 years that Korean filmmakers have been given the freedom to make films in the way that they need to make them. But certainly, you know, Korea has a film history that they should be proud of. There have been a lot of really amazing filmmakers over the years, and it's good that now, you know, the rest of the world is following Korean cinema very closely, and that we have all this talent now, but we shouldn't forget all the talent that led up to that over the years.
So you think that the beginning of democracy in Korea, that was maybe the spark that...
Yeah, actually I do believe that, because, you know, so much was changing in Korean society. If we look at what happened in the 80s and the 90s, then you had a new generation of producers who first came into the film industry, and they were really motivated to make a lot of changes, and they wanted to say important things about Korean society, and then they brought in a new wave of directors. So it took some time to change the film industry, but those changes reflected overall changes in Korean society.
Okay.
But actually, I'm still surprised that even during the military governments here, I think some of the directors really pushed the limits of what is possible and not.
Yeah.
And my really favorite movie of all Korean movies is called Obaltan from 1960, which translates to The Aimless Bullet, maybe.
That's it, yeah.
And it's a blunt picture of post-war Seoul, and it's depressing but also very touching in its own way, and it's really gave me the feeling that I really learned a lot about how Seoul was like at that time, and that movie escaped this censorship and made it out to the spotlight.
It did. It was made between the April 19th revolution of 1960 and then the military coup of 1961. So it was made within this very brief window when censorship was light. And yeah, it's a very hard-hitting film, but fascinating. The Korean Film Archive has restored the film in the past couple of years. And so we can watch it now with these beautifully restored images that we never could before.
Now, aside from being a mastermind director, Bong Joon-ho is also known back home here in South Korea as being a vocal political activist. He advocated for freedom of speech and expression, a move that resulted in the director being placed on the infamous blacklist by the previous Park Geun-hye administration. So being placed on this blacklist, what kind of impact do you think this had for director Bong Joon-ho and his films?
Well, we know from other movie makers that during that time it was difficult to get financing, but there were thousands and thousands filmmakers, theater directors, artists, poets on that list. So among them, Bong Joon-ho was clearly one of the more powerful. He is a well-known figure, a popular figure. So I would assume that it doesn't affect him as much as it would affect artists on a smaller level, on a not so well-known level.
So affected, but not as much as other people.
That's my guess, yeah.
Yeah, a couple of years ago, I interviewed Im Soon-hye, the movie director of Waikiki Brothers, and she was blacklisted too, and she almost wore it as a badge of honor. She's like, okay, what I'm doing is good since I got blacklisted. That being said, I'm joking, but I think it's totally unacceptable. It's really, really worrying to see that this could happen in Korea. I think that can lead to censorship, and even I agree with you. Directors like Bong Joon-ho probably were not impacted, but there is probably a lot of small producers, directors who were impacted by these measures.
Especially if they were being reliant on government funding.
Yeah, a lot of independent filmmakers, if you work in independent film, you take a conscious decision to pursue kind of an alternative point of view, and you're dealing with subjects that may not be as popular, but which are really important to discuss and to put out into society. And so, it makes sense that the government should support this kind of filmmaking to promote more diversity in the film industry and just to promote film culture. But in these years, if you were on the blacklist, then you were blocked from government funding, and so I know a lot of people who really struggled under that time. Yeah.
Okay. Various government policy measures, as well as institutions, have been put in place to support the future growth of Korean films. Fabian, what kind of policy measures are in place in Germany to support the local cinema?
So in Germany, there's no movie quota or something like that, but there is a very, very strong state finance system. So I would say in 1 year, there may be only 5 German productions that would also survive commercially on its own. The rest can only sustain because they get government support. And that is actually a problem. Of course, you get a lot of small, charming, artistically interesting movies that are getting made with and would not have been getting made without the money of the government. But it's basically like a very communist system, and the artists and the writers literally try to make movies that is aimed at the juries of those panels that decide about the government funding, and those are not artists themselves, but they are bureaucrats.
Right.
And that's also one of the reasons why you see over proportionally many movies about it's always the Second World War, or the separation of East and West Germany, or some old literature novel that's getting made into a movie, and often you have the feeling German movies are made too much with the brain, but not enough with the heart. And there's a lot of boring movies actually in Germany. Now it's getting better, but no, I'm really very critical, because when you have so much money getting invested into the movie industry, and then you see the results, often when I'm here in the Busan Film Festival and then see going to watch the German entry, sometimes I really feel ashamed. It's a true thing.
What I like about the French tax system is that even foreign movies help to finance the French movies. For example, if you go watch Avengers, then part of your ticket will be spent in the production of French works. So I think it's a clever way.
Yeah.
So we don't have, in Korea, screen quotas in movie theaters, but we have screen quotas on TV.
Oh, okay.
So for TV channel, they have to broadcast 60% of works coming from European Union and 30% of movies, at least in French language.
I guess that, in a way, mitigates the necessity for a screen quota system, which we have in Korea. It dictates that all cinemas must have Korean films on screen for a minimum of 73 days out of the year. This is 1/5 of the annual operating days. On the other hand, there are countries that have repealed its screen quota policy altogether as part of a broader trade agreement deal. So you mentioned the TV quota system. Do you think that's been beneficial in terms of maintaining and fostering, cultivating the French TV industry?
Yeah, of course. I mean, maybe as a French, but I hate the idea that culture is considered as any product like smartphone or potatoes. Culture is not a product that can be put inside a treaty of trade agreement.
So you think they should be kept aside from trade agreements?
It has to be.
It's interesting. I mean, you see, in France, cinema is really appreciated as an art form, but you also have to see. I mean, it's a cultural value, but it's definitely economically the most expensive cultural good that is produced, right? So if you have several $million of budget, then you definitely also have to think economically. I think you cannot totally restrict it.
Yeah, but okay. A couple of weeks ago, finally we found a babysitter for our kids. So with my wife, we decided to watch a movie. The only movie we could watch was Avengers. In all the movie theaters in my neighborhood, like half of the screens were showing Avengers. I don't want to watch Avengers. and
I sense a lot of anger.
Yeah, I was angry because there is so many movies I want to watch, and this lack of diversity, the fact that the Hollywood studio have such like a financial power to impose their movie, like to promote their movies. Like, this is a huge trend. Like, there is nothing you can do. So I think it's important to have quotas.
Wow, that's very black and white. I mean, I didn't watch any of the Avengers. I really don't care about
Good
that.
for
I didn't
you.
want to do it. But the thing is, it's very popular. Like, the young people here, they like to watch it, and so give them the choice, right?
I know it's popular, but there is as well the fact that because they're the only movies you can watch, like, more people watch it. If there were more choice, I mean, that day we ended up watching Avengers. If I could, I would have watched something else.
Yeah, I mean, there's sort of two ways to look at it too, because I mean, a lot of people say that you should let the market decide what people want to watch, and in one sense that's true. But markets are about competition, and if you have a situation where, like with Avengers, I mean, I think when they counted up the actual number of screens that it was on, it was like 90% or something during the first days that it was opening in the theater. And so that's not competition. And you know, in markets as well, then you sometimes have situations where you need to prevent monopolization. And so for me too, I believe in screen diversity. I believe in having a lot of different kinds of stories presented to viewers. I mean, certainly there are a lot of people who wanted to see Avengers, and we need to find a way to let them see Avengers. But you know, it doesn't have to be the case that every other film gets pushed out of the theater during those 2 weeks. There should be a system where we can keep some other alternatives in the theater at the same time as letting people watch what they want to see.
So that we give Fred more choice.
Exactly.
Right, so you mentioned the word monopoly there, screen monopoly, so let's talk about that. The so-called screen monopolies are often seen when a Hollywood blockbuster or other big budget films are released and take up the vast majority of screens at any given time. Why is it that we see this phenomenon happening on a regular basis in Korea? Is it unique to Korea, or can we see it elsewhere around the world?
I mean, you see it all around the world, but it seems to be particularly extreme in Korea. And
Why is that?
may reflect a couple of different things. I mean, partly it's the structure of the industry, and that you only really have 3 companies that control almost all of the theaters in the country. There are very few theaters outside of those big 3 chains. So there's a structural issue. I mean, there may be a cultural issue as well. We all know that Korea, when things get hot in Korea, the whole nation kind of latches onto it.
But they're very trendy, they're sensitive about trends.
Yeah, and there are fewer, it seems like there's less diversity of groups within the audience itself. That's one thing that I think there could be improved in the future for Korea to get more spotlight being put on alternative types of films.
Yeah, if I can, I really agree with what you said, and I think that the fact that the integration, the vertical integration of Korean movie industry is problematic. I heard a lot of movie directors complaining about the fact that the financial people who detain the money in Korean movie industry, they don't want to take risk anymore. So the result, what you see, is movies are more and more like full of cliche and conventional and less creative, just because they just want to apply the same recipe over and over.
The tried and true successful mirror.
Exactly. And one of the reasons why I think Bong Joon-ho Palme d'Or is a great news is that Bong Joon-ho is one of the movie directors that managed to keep in his own style. He didn't compromise. He managed to continue to do what he wants to do. And actually, there is not so many movie directors like this anymore. And I do think that some change, internal change within the movie cinema, Korean movie industry are necessary.
So staying with that vertical integration of distribution and screenings and theater ownership, do you think the big conglomerates, they should be divested of either of the 2 arms then?
Yeah, a lot of people point to the so-called Paramount decision of 1948, which you had a situation in Hollywood where there were a few big studios who owned their own theater chains as well. And the court ruled that they needed to sell their theater chains, and that there shouldn't be this kind of vertical integration because it was poor for competition. And actually, you had a really interesting situation develop over the next couple decades where there did seem to be an increase in diversity, like in the 1950s, and the kinds of films that were available to viewers. And you know, in many ways, that was a kind of exciting era resulted from that. Korea is a very different situation, and it's hard to predict exactly what the effect would be if a similar law would be passed. But certainly there does seem to be something sort of unfair about the current system, and it's very top-heavy. There are just a small number of players who are making the big decisions about which films get screened and which films don't. And so it's something that a lot of politicians have on their minds, and some of them have proposed this idea of bringing about something similar to the Paramount decision, but they haven't been able to bring it to a majority yet.
We'll have to wrap it up there. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for your insight. Following his return to Korea after winning the top prize at Cannes Film Festival, director Bong Joon said that the award felt like a gift to the Korean film industry, which is marking the centennial anniversary this year. We hope the progress made by the Korean cinema over the last century will serve as a strong foundation for the country's films to continue mesmerizing audiences worldwide. That's all we have for this week. Thank you for tuning in, and goodbye.